Students, an informal letter is actually a letter which is written informally. To understand this, you need to understand the word informal and formal. If you understand the word formal and informal, then you can easily understand what would be an informal letter and what would be a formal letter. So an informal letter is a letter that is that is written informally. Suppose you are writing a letter to a friend, to a family member, or to a relative, where you need not to follow any formalities. There is no formalities, there is no set of rules that you have to follow. So that is an informal way of approach, and that is an informal way of communicate. So that is actually known as informal. Formal are generally an official thing, an official letter, and when you have to show a place where you have to show formality, that is actually known as a student. To understand what is formal letter and informal letter, first you need to understand the word formal and informal. Actually, when informal and formal are just actually the two different ways of expressing the language. Informal and formal are actually when you are talking, and language, when we need to use the language, we actually need in different with different people on different places, we use language differently, and formal and informal are just the ways of using the language in different ways, just the ways of using the language this is the different way of using the language. When you are talking to your friend and you are talking to your boss, your behavior, your conduct, your etiquette would change. Your way of communicating, your way of talking would change whenever you are talking to friend in comparison to when you are talking to your boss. So it means to say that when a place where we need to follow a certain etiquette, it means a code of conduct, a particular code of behavior where you need to follow a particular conduct of behavior, that is actually a formal way of expressing the language. While when you are talking to someone where you need not to follow any rules and regulation, you can just speak in an spontaneous way, that is actually known as an informal way of talking, and that mode we can use only with our friends, with our relatives, so to some extent with our family members, where we need not to follow any law of formalities. While when you are talking to your teachers, principals, you need to show a particular code of conduct, you need to show a particular etiquette. So that is actually a formal way of using the language. So two different forms of language, in either in written or in spoken, is actually the formal way and informal way. So when we are writing to someone whom we can talk informally, that would be an informal letter, and whom only we can talk in an informal way, with our friends, with our relatives, with our family members. So those letters that we write to them are actually informal letters, and the letters that we write to our teachers, bank managers, of official members, those letters are actually the formal letters where you need to follow a certain so the formal way of using the language and informal way of using the language are actually different, and they actually serve for different purposes. As formal languages does not use colloquialism, contractions, or first person pronouns such as I or we, while informal language is more casual and spontaneous. So when you are talking to your friend and family members, there's you just expresses yourself spontaneously, you casually, you do not, if you understand the difference between formal wear and informal wear, then you can easily understand the difference between the formal letter and informal letter. So actually, and that is why it is used when communicating with friends or family, either in writing form or in conversational form, or it means to say in oral form. in spoken form. So actually whenever you are writing a letter, you are writing a letter to your family friends, then it is automatically an how many parts of formal letter or an informal letter has, and how we can write those letters, what are the ways of writing a formal letter and informal letter. That's what we will learn next. Student, a classic informal letter has actually 5 parts, about which I will teach you in detail tomorrow.